Hey everybody, this is Sherri Echols, your host at the Operation Successful Transition podcast. And today I'm so excited. I get to introduce you to Jody Fletcher. Jody retired from the Navy after 29 years. He served as a Special Operations Independent Duty Corpsman for the first couple of decades of his career and retired as a Commander Master Chief. As an executive coach and leadership development consultant, Jody taps into more than 3 decades of dynamic leadership experience, team building, and operational execution to help clients engage their challenges and discover a sustainable path to success. Hey, Jody, how are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Sure thing. It's such a good thing to see your face. So, I guess let's start out with what kind of inspired you to do this leadership training and make a whole business out of it.
It was, as every good story started out in a bar. I have a friend who is a, very successful guy in corporate America. And I used to have to go to DC a lot for meetings and stuff like that. And every time I was up there, I'd crash at his house. We'd go out to dinner, go out for a drink, whatever. And we always ended up talking about work, of course. And it dawned on me one night as I was getting closer and closer to retirement, it dawned on me that all of our issues were the same. He was doing multi-gazillion dollar deals, and I, of course, was, doing military stuff. But everything that we were talking about was the issues were the same because they were people issues.
Yeah.
And what kept me in the military for as long as I stayed in, after I got out of the reconnaissance and special operations world, I stayed in for another, 7+ years because I really enjoyed the leadership development and kind of the coaching aspect of what I was doing. I like to call, myself the fat old guy behind the desk at that point. And that's what kept me in. So anyway, he and I were having a drink one night, and of course, the conversation led into work and all that. And he mentioned hiring an executive coach for one of his up and coming leaders. And of course, I had heard the term like everybody else, but I kind of pulled the thread on that and asked him more about it. And I just remember it hitting me. That's it. That's what I'm going to do when I retire. And within a week, I had done a whole bunch of research and found a place to get certified, on the outside and everything else, and started to pursue that. And that's how I ended up here where I am.
Yeah. Well, it's it's an interesting thing to do. I really think, customer service used to be such a big stressor in all kinds of different organizations. I think that's kind of gone by the wayside. And I feel like, I don't know, maybe leadership training has as well. They just kind of expect people to do it on their own, maybe. And people are kind of fumbling around. I don't know. What's your experience with that?
Leadership development is one of the things that is not really taught anywhere outside, and I shouldn't say that, outside of the military, where it's focused on from day one.
Yeah.
There are organizations out there, in my opinion, that are absolutely doing it right. They have leadership development cohorts for all different levels of leaders. But by and large, what I've found is that it's not taught in school. It's not taught in most organizations. So unless you happen to fall in with a good mentor or a good leader that you kind of follow, and that's the natural progression of it, but there's really not a lot out there that's formalized. I feel like we're starting to see more and more of it because people understand the importance of it.
Right.
So yeah, I'm trying, and I say this out loud every time I get a chance. I've got my foot in the door here at our local university. I'm teaching some emergency management stuff, but I really want to teach leadership 101 to undergrads because I feel like that's where it should start.
Right. Everyone could definitely benefit from that, even if they don't get into some kind of leadership position, just as being a better human being, right?
100%. At first, you're always leading yourself. And at some point or another, we all take on leadership roles within our family, within our friend groups, all of that. And it's really more about how you're showing up as a human being and interacting with other human beings than anything else.
Yeah. So we didn't say what the name of your business is. What is your program called? Do you have a
I do. Yeah. My
website?
business is called E5 Professional Coaching and Consulting. And I'm in the middle of writing a book right now called Good Humans Make Great Leaders. And really everything that I do is centered around that. It starts with emotional intelligence, self-awareness, leading yourself, and then builds upon that how do you become a great leader after developing your skills as a good human.
Yeah, yeah. You know, there are, I think there's a certain kind of type of person who like reads personal development and business books and that kind of thing. And um, I read those kind of things are fascinating to me. I've got Leaders Eat Last on my shelf to read, and I'm definitely going to buy yours as soon as it comes out. But um, so you do mostly corporate kind of training, and you're looking to get into the university.
I'll take any university that wants to take me. I put it out there in the public every time I get a chance.
Yeah,
I use a unique approach, Sherri, in my opinion, because I don't think you can swing a stick without hitting some old retired military person who wants to talk to you about leadership.
that's
I'm
true.
certain I'm certainly not unique in that, but I do all of my facilitation through the lens of pop culture, and I feel like that makes it more fun and unique, and it's easy for us to pick apart people that we see on the screen or read in books because they have all the same character traits that we want to discuss when it
Mhm.
comes to leadership and being a good human. But it's easy for us to pick apart Will Ferrell, who, always plays a very unself-aware person. And of course, it leads him into all kinds of, you know, hilarious moments. But I like to go with that model. And yeah, I think I got down a rabbit hole there. I forgot what you asked.
Rabbit holes are great. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good. You said the pop culture method is how you kind of get your word out. So you do like video kinds of things, or explain that a little bit better.
Yeah, and you asked me if I do mostly corporate. And of course, I do work with corporate. I work with law enforcement a fair bit. I work with individuals, and that's individual coaching, and that's a little different. I am ICF, which is the International Coaching Federation, and they're kind of the governing body. There's two recognized agencies, if you will, for coaching, and ICF is, in my opinion, the main one. I honestly don't even remember the name of the other one, but I'm a PCC, which is a professional certified coach.
Mhm.
And that is a little different than the workshops that I do. But the workshops I do are, corporate. I've done local coffee shops here, some of our local banks, really whoever's looking for it. And it's everything from 45 minutes all the way up to an entire year of training. I can kind of tailor what they're looking for, or my work, I guess, to what they're looking for.
Okay, so I guess people don't know what they don't know, so you're able to see maybe what a person might be missing on their path to being a great leader, right? And you can kind of guide and mentor and teach in that way. Do you think anyone could be a great leader? Do you think you could turn just any old guy off the street into a good leader?
And that's the premise of my book. If you're a good human first, and if you're not a good human, then in my opinion, and based on my definition of leadership, you will never be a great leader. But I feel like most people can be good humans. Of course, there are those outliers. And when I'm doing the pop culture stuff, I talk about there's good leaders and bad leaders. Those are really the only two types of leader. Everything else is a style of leadership.
Mhm.
And I'll put up pictures of King Joffrey from the Game of Thrones, or Miranda Priestley, played by Meryl Streep in The Devil Wears Prada, as
Yeah.
examples of bad leaders. You could probably argue, if you've seen Game of Thrones, that King Joffrey was just not a good human at all. I don't know that he could have ever been a great leader. Miranda Priestley is one of those who I don't think she was inherently evil. So, with a lot of work, she probably could have been a good human and then turned into a great leader. But if you are a good human and you genuinely care about other people, hands down, we can turn you into a great leader.
Okay. So if somebody was just dabbling and had the idea that they wanted, what would be a good way for them to start into if they weren't? I mean, if it's too late to go into the military, that is obviously a great way to learn some leadership skills, but just somebody in their average life, a guy or a lady with a family, how do I lead my family better? What are kind of tools that we could use, or what would be a good place to get started before hiring someone like you in a whole program just to do a little better and get started on that path?
It all really boils down to self reflection and self awareness. And that starts with honesty and a lot of, I would not hard work, but a lot of deliberate work, and asking yourself, how am I really showing up in the world compared to how I want to show up? and realizing that we cannot control the emotions that we feel, but we can control how we express them. And a lot of people, I find it's a matter of identifying the emotion that they're feeling, maybe even determining where that comes from, and then figuring out, kind of putting a filter in place before you express that emotion. Some of us have Brita filters, others have chain links for filters, right? And we all have those friends who, whatever they're feeling, it's going to come out. So I would say really starting there. And then I also talk a lot about the voice in your head. Every one of us have a voice in our head. And that voice knows every one of your deepest, darkest secrets. And it knows the exact wrong or right button to push at the exact moment. And it's really about self-awareness, is really about building a relationship with that voice. And I've heard other coaches, and I always tell everybody before I start talking in a group setting, I'm no expert, right? I'm just a dude on a journey to be a better human and a better leader. I do have 30 years of experience in the military, and now I'm working on 4 years in the outside as well. And I have a lot of experience to draw from, but I'm trying to get better at this every day, like everyone else is. But I've heard other people, so-called experts, say you just need to ignore that voice in your head. And I don't believe you can do that. I feel that the most important thing you can do is build a relationship that you want with that voice in your head. And if it's the mean girl from high school, or the bully who stole your lunch money, or your mom with her arms crossed and that overbearing look, now we're adults, or young adults even. How do you want to start to establish and build and change the relationship with that voice in your head so that it's more positive than negative? And once you get to that point, then you're good.
Yeah, I've got a real estate coach, and her thing, we deal first with mindset on everything, right? Because most of your success and most of your progress is outside your comfort zone. And the reason we stay in our comfort zone is because of that voice in our head, right? And so I didn't put my bracelet on yet this morning, but she gives us all a bracelet, and when we have a negative thought, we talk negative to ourselves, we're supposed to snap that bracelet and then switch it to the other hand and change it into something positive, like, I look fat on camera, to you look great on camera, you are you, something like that. But just interrupting that pattern of negative self-talk and changing it into something that's more positive and nurturing, and bringing you up into that, the next phase, or into leadership, or into something that's uncomfortable, just being better and feeling better, right?
Ideally, that voice in our head should be our best friend, our coach, our confidant, and of course, there's some accountability that comes with that. And I like to use the example of, if you failed a test, the voice in your head knows whether or not you really studied hard enough for it. And if you did, then hopefully you've got the kind of relationship with that voice where it says, hey, you did the best you could, and it just wasn't good enough. But it can also hold you accountable and say, hey, come on, you and I both know we didn't study hard enough.
Right.
So that's that honest type of relationship that I personally try to build with that voice in my head, because we all mess up, we all make mistakes, and when we make a mistake, what are we learning from it, and how are we moving forward? And I love the positive shift, the reframe. I do that quite a bit as well. The example I always use is, I'm driving to the beach to go surf, and there's a ton of tourist traffic, right? And then I start like, oh, all these tourists. It's not, this whole toxic positivity thing that was going on for a while. It's not toxic positivity. It's just a matter of saying, hey, at least I'm going to the beach to go surf.
Right.
And all these, I'm lucky enough to live in a place that people come to vacation. So it's a matter of reframing these things, to your point, so that you've got a positive outlook on it. And then when there are negative things that happen, it's a matter of saying, okay, what did we learn from this? And then how can we move forward?
Yeah. So another question I have in this regard is, imposter syndrome. How would you say someone should deal with that? If you've got all this training, but there's just something inside that makes you feel like maybe you're not worthy, or you just can't get past that to really put the pedal to the metal and go forward.
I do a lot with EQI, which is emotional intelligence, and one of the concepts or factors in the EQI is reality testing. And imposter syndrome plays heavy into that. And it's usually based in fear and lack of self-confidence. And it's a matter of helping people understand how to balance that with you're afraid of this or you feel less confident in this, but looking at what's real. I went to school and did all this stuff. I have all of this experience. And that's where that voice in your head comes in to hopefully be the coach for you and say, listen, you do deserve to be here, or you did work really hard to get here. And, of course, there's the kind of idea that, hey, everybody's got imposter syndrome, which is true. I talked to a lot of people, and I myself, when I was the fat old guy behind the desk, I remember thinking, how did I even get here? It's not what I set out to do, but I ended up there.
Yeah.
And you just have to sit down and be real with yourself and look at the facts. And that oftentimes helps people build their confidence and assuage those fears. But again, it goes back to self-reflection and self-awareness and figuring out also what is causing me to feel like an imposter. Because for some, it might not be fear. It might be something else.
Interesting. So what am I not asking you? What's something that's important to you that we should be talking about?
I know that you like to talk about, this is all kind of about successful transition, and I wouldn't do it justice if I didn't plug kind of the transition piece for folks that are coming out of, whether it's the military or job to job, out of a relationship. There's a lot of different transition. And one of the things that I talk about with people whenever you're transitioning out of anything is figure out what you don't want to do anymore and start from there. So this is, of course, for those of us that were in the military, whether you were in for a couple of years or 30 years, when you're finally free, right? And you can make your own decisions. And not that we don't have individual decision in the military, we do. But I grew up in a military family. I spent, over 29 years in the military. I turned 50 in a few days. So really only in the last few years have I had, no kidding, kind of free will. And it can be overwhelming. You also have to mourn the loss of your identity, kind of that former, for 30 years, I was attached to the uniform, there's rank, there's all these things. And we all have these things in our lives. Sometimes you have to mourn the loss of that as you begin to transition out, and then realize it again, for me, it always comes back to self-awareness. And whenever I start talking, I always put up pictures of me with, in the military doing military stuff, and then surfing, and then with my daughter at festivals, music festivals and stuff. And the point that I'm trying to bring out there is I'm the same dude inside of every one of those pictures. I'm just wearing different clothes and doing different things.
Yeah.
So once you know who you are at your core, transition is a little, not easier, but it can be more deliberate. And then the next step is figuring out, once you know who you are, what do you not want to do anymore? For me, I don't want to sit in meetings that make no sense or that I have no purpose to be in. I don't want anybody controlling my calendar, and I don't want to work a 9 to 5. So it was when I decided those were my no's, it was much easier for me to turn down. Of course, when you retire, there's people reaching out to offer jobs and stuff like that. And a lot of people jump right into those things because of fear. They're afraid to not have that constant paycheck anymore, or whatever it is. And so again, you can apply this to relationships. I'm afraid not to have a person. I'm afraid not to have this. But when you decide these things, then you can set that boundary, and it's easier for you to say no and then kind of start this new path. And then, of course, once you couple that with what you do want, now you can really kind of start to zero in on where you want to go. So again, regardless of the transition type, work on that self-awareness, work on who you are. If you have to mourn the loss of a former identity or attachment, do that. And then figure out what you don't want to do, couple it with what you do want to do, and you can kind of go for it.
Yeah. That can be kind of a big ask, though. You say that the 3 things you didn't want to do, that left a whole bunch. Like what I thought of was in high school, I took those aptitude tests, right? And they're like, you can do anything you want. I'm like, that's no help whatsoever.
Right.
No help at all. So I've talked to a lot of people, and the one thing a lot of people have mentioned that they miss is really the camaraderie in that relationship, that network. Another thing I've heard a lot of people talk about is exactly what you're talking about. They're discussing kind of mourning the loss of the esteem that they had, the status that they had, the trust, everything that they had in the military. And now they're kind of starting over again at maybe square two instead of square one, kind of depends on what your situation is when you get out, what you're what you were doing when you were in. But I've talked to a couple of people who just felt helpless because they had put in so many applications and they couldn't really find something that was where they wanted to be, you know? So I think that's good, wise advice to sort of mourn the loss of what that was and realize who you are going to be going forward because it's different. It really is. It's
Yeah, and a lot of people, especially if you stayed in for a long time and you've attained a senior rank, you feel like, oh, and I've seen this before, and this is really attached to ego. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but it is,
yeah.
not meaning it is negative, but it is attached to ego. And
Yes.
people that were identified as their rank, then when they get out and they realize nobody cares, they're going to say thank you for your service and then move on with their day. How are you going to reestablish yourself? And that's where this human quality comes back. That's where you have to come back to who am I at my core and what skill set am I bringing to the outside world? Because nobody cares that did whatever you did or were the rank specifically. If you were in a specific field, then
Mm-hmm.
you have a ton of experience. But yeah, you might not, if you were way up the food chain, you might not jump into an organization and be way up the food chain. You might have to work your way up. And it's a hard pill for some people to swallow.
Yeah.
I've definitely worked through those issues with some people and really helped them kind of dial it back to who they are and where they want to go. The other thing for me, of course, everybody asks, do you miss it? Do you miss it? And I don't miss any of it. Not one bit. I stay surrounded. I live close to a base and I still have a lot of friends. So I don't miss the camaraderie. And I always had a lot of civilian friends as well as military. So I feel like I've still got a great friend group on both sides. Stay in touch with, all the guys and gals that I used to work with. But it wasn't until about a year of being out that I realized I missed interacting with young people. And that was one of my favorite parts of my job was being able to interact with our good 18, 19, 20-year-old young men and women coming into the service and hearing their ideas and looking at all the great things that they were doing and their creativity and all of that. So that's why I've kind of started to dig back into getting into the colleges because I love talking to them to hear what was important to them. And honestly, we met at the Entrepreneur Boot Camp for Veterans
Mm-hmm.
there in Texas. And going through that program kind of helped me realize I want to focus my practice on emerging leaders instead of just, of course, and what I have found is when I'm doing that type of training, oftentimes the senior leaders will come in and say, hey, I would like to work with you individually, or do you have something for us as well? But there's so much goodness because you can still catch people before they develop a lot of bad habits
Yeah.
or go down a wrong path or just are running around blindly. If you can catch them early, and Sherry, none of what I talk about is mind blowing. There's not a new leadership concept out there. It's all the same stuff. It's really about finding a way to deliver it that resonates with people and consistently delivering that message. So when I work with groups for longer periods of time, it's my favorite thing to do because we might do a big workshop, but then every month we're touching base and doing small group coaching or something like that. And I love if I've got multiple small groups and I log in with group one, last week, and this week I'm logging in with group two, and they're already talking about what I was talking about with group one, which means they're talking about it in the office space. And that's what you want because, you can bring somebody like me in, get everybody motivated. We're having fun. We're talking about all this stuff. I leave and a week later, everybody forgets.
Right. Yeah.
But if you've got that kind of steady drumbeat, that's where change comes.
Yeah.
And if you're looking to develop leaders, especially the younger leaders, it's that constant interaction with them. And earlier, when we started, I said, there are some organizations out there that are doing it. They're doing an amazing job. And here locally, we have quite a few that have a annual cohort where they just kind of go through all this. And I'm lucky enough to get invited into some of those as a guest speaker. So I'll come in and do a couple hours or a half day workshop. And it's just a different flavor and it's fun, but they're doing it right. And when you walk into these organizations, you can feel, and this is a thing I learned as the fat old guy behind the desk, you can feel culture when you walk into an organization.
Yes.
Because when I was at that level, that was our job. It was myself and my Marine counterpart and then the general. and we would tour around and we'd visit all these different units, and you could tell within minutes the good ones versus the bad ones. And it's all these little telltale things. And it really is just about, how much the leaders are caring for their people and then developing that leadership throughout the ranks.
Yeah. So you touched on something I believe is important. Like you say, you can go to a one day thing and get all riled up, but you're not going to implement and you're not going to carry forward and develop any further unless you have, exceptional self discipline, or you have that support in the mastermind group to talk about ideas, and it just exponentiates the growth to have that follow up, like you say, the small group meetings and more exposure to you to talk through ideas and questions, things like that.
Yeah. And somebody like me, I always tell everybody I'm learning as much from y'all as you are from me, hopefully, especially with the younger folks, because you're learning things that are important to them that, we might not understand, or it also helps you develop your empathy and all that kind of stuff. My daughter just worked through a situation over the summer with, where she was working. And, as an older guy, I was thinking, well, it's not really that important, or it's not as that big of a deal, or in 10 years from now, you're not even going to remember this. But I had to put myself in the mind of my 20-year-old daughter and say, this is one of the most important things in the world to her right now. And also a great opportunity for her to exercise some of these leadership, kind of traits and characteristics and work through this. So I feel that for me personally, when I'm working with young people, I can put myself in their shoes and say, okay, as an old man, this isn't important, but if I look at it from their lens, this matters a great deal.
Yeah, that's fun. I think it's okay. I mean, I know it's okay for you to have these different niches, to be a young person teacher. And I'm sure that you're going to learn things from them that you can teach to the older people, and vice versa as well. People who've been through years and years in corporate world have learned some things that the young people won't know going in. Young people have all these ideas. They haven't been kind of beaten down yet by conformity and by that's not your job, that's not in your description, those kinds of things. So I think it's awesome to nurture those qualities and to keep them curious and thinking. I think that social media especially has removed our thinking time. I've just started into the book Road Less Stupid, and it's about spending time each day thinking, writing down questions and then answering them for yourself, and just kind of, the great philosophers, all they had time to do was think all day, right? And there are principles that are still around today, thousands of years later, right? So good to encourage those people to think. And
yeah, one of my favorite things to do, and I do it a lot with law enforcement groups when I'm working with them, but really anywhere, is to spark the conversation of the us versus them, the old generation versus the new generation. Because really, especially as leaders, our job is to bridge that gap. And the very senior leaders, it's really your job to build that bridge between the older generation and the younger generation, because the younger folks are creative and they're still full of energy and they're not jaded. But the older folks have experience, real world experience and wisdom and knowledge. And if the teams, again, that I walk into that are already doing amazing stuff, those are the teams that are full of people on both ends of the spectrum that respect each other. And you've got the younger folks asking the older folks for advice, and then the older folks freely asking, hey, what are your ideas? And tapping into that creativity and that energy that the young folks bring. The organizations that are suffering are the ones that are split. And, the military, the law enforcement, I'm sure probably every environment in corporate America as well. This generation didn't have it as hard as we did, and uphill both ways, in the snow and barefoot going to school and all that stuff.
yeah,
But the reality is the generation before us said the exact same stuff, and we all turned out just fine. But it is our job as the senior leaders to build that bridge so that the creativity can be matched with the wisdom and the knowledge. Then you've got a team that's going to be unstoppable.
yeah, yeah, yeah. The world kind of changes. The people are the same, and we turn out okay. But technology now compared to technology when I was a little kid is so different. How can you not be be different, think different. If you're exposed to all these things that are out now, like I remember the first microwave. I remember the telephone on the wall. I remember, when wheels were still square, that kind of thing. So it's just a different world that they grow up in. And it's interesting to see the ideas that they have and talking to millennials about what bothers them. It's such different things from what bother people in my age group. You know what I mean? They're concerned with the planet and animal against animal cruelty, and all these different kinds of things that are, I don't know, it's more tenderhearted than I expected, I guess. I don't know, I can't exactly put the word on it, but it's surprising what comes out of the young people, I think.
Yeah, and just, this to me centers back around people-centered leadership,
Mhm.
and realizing what is important to the people that you're leading is a trait or a quality of an amazing leader. And if you understand that that's what's important to those people, and you can facilitate that into the conversation or a part of their work, or realize that that's what motivates them.
Yeah.
A lot of young folks that I see now, they're not of the generation where you're going to get into a company and that's going to be your ride or die for 30 years. And they're
Yeah.
bouncing around between all these different companies. And to some degree, I think it's their lifestyle, right? They want to make money, then go travel, then make money, then go travel, which I think is awesome.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I'm talking to young people, the culture didn't fit, or they didn't like what the company stood for, or
Yeah.
all these other things. And I think there's, again, both sides of the fence. Sometimes when I'm talking to young folks, I'm like, you probably should have stuck that one out, or, maybe um, you pulled the trigger a little too fast on that. But then others, it's like, okay, yeah, that sounds like it really did suck. And it's probably a great thing that you moved. But these organizations that build this amazing culture are the ones that seem to be a little more sticky for these young folks, these super creative folks coming in, where they love working there.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's one of the places I go here. They've got the nitro brew coffee on tap. There's dogs walking around everywhere.
Fresh.
Everybody's
Yeah.
super casual. And I was like, oh my God, I love this place. I don't
Yeah.
ever want to leave. And, that's one of the places that's got amazing culture because they treat their people right and they realize what cares to them. People just want to know that they're cared for and that they've got the space to be creative and develop as humans and as professionals. And in these stifling environments, the young people of today, they don't want to mess with that. So if they feel like they're being stifled, they're going to go find something else.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally different than past generations. Yeah.
Yeah, when I joined the Navy, my dad told me, he was an old Navy guy as well, and worked with the Marines his entire career like I did. And I remember him telling me, if somebody tells you to do something, just do it, unless it's going to get somebody hurt or killed. And then he said, if it's one of those two things, then you can say something. But if not, don't say anything until you do it. Then you can go ask why you had to do it. That was his advice going in, which at the time I went in 1992. That was great advice. My dad, he's got an amazing work ethic, and I learned a lot of that from him.
Yeah.
But nowadays, you definitely need, as the leader, you need to explain why and then be open to ideas. I think the happy medium is also then the younger generation or the people with the ideas realizing that not every idea is going to be able to be implemented, right? So as the leader, that's what we kind of have to work with. This, hey, let's have a space where creativity can be explored, but realize that maybe you don't fully understand the budget, so we can't, do all this other stuff or whatever, but kind of coming together. The organizations that don't, and it's my way or the highway, are the ones that are struggling to keep people.
Yeah. I recognize that. Yeah. My daughter, one of my daughters, she's 30, and her ideal situation would be a remote job so she could live on the beach in some Spanish speaking country. And she has a job, that she goes to, or like an office that she goes to maybe once a month for a few days, that has an amazing culture and is a lot of fun to be in. I'm like, that sounds great to me too. Why didn't, my job graduating out of A&M, we had to wear pantyhose and suits and all that kind of buttoned up stuff. And there was no creativity. If you worked faster or better than someone else, you got tamped down. So you work the same speed as everybody else and nobody stood out. And I don't know, just a totally different atmosphere.
Yeah, 100%. And I think those are organizations that kind of go by the wayside at times as well, or they don't progress as rapidly as others that are tapping into that creativity and the resourcefulness. The whole virtual working has changed the landscape when it
Oh,
comes
yeah.
to connecting with people. And I just finished a couple of days ago, I had my last client. I had a group of like 12 individual clients, and they're all remote. And I was working with the leaders of some of their smaller teams. And it was interesting because we would talk about making connections with people. And, Lincoln classically called it leadership by walking around. And in the Navy, we called it deck plate leadership. But really, it means getting out there and getting to know your people.
Yeah.
And how do you do that in a virtual environment? I'm not saying it's impossible, because it's not, but it's different. I used to walk around, I kept note cards. And if somebody was crushing it, I would just write them a little thank you note, and I would leave it on their desk, inconspicuously, and just to say, thank you. I see what you're doing and I really appreciate it, and you're crushing it at this thing. How do you do that virtually?
Right.
And so I don't know, it's a different dynamic, and we're working through these things and finding ways to do it. I do like the idea where they all come together once a month, or whatever, because at least you're getting to meet people. And I mean, I know you're a human because we met in Texas,
Yeah.
but I've done a lot of these where it's all virtual kind of stuff, and you can build relationships, but it's not quite the same. Now, again, this is coming from us, right? And we're on the side where we remember telephones on the wall and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, if
Yeah.
I talk to my daughter or the young people, all they know is texting and chatting, and so for them, this is more real, I think, than being in person at times. So to them, it's the opposite side.
Yeah. Social anxiety when you're there in person, it's so different when you're talking to a screen, right?
Yeah, or chatting or emailing or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I can do videos all day long, but you put me in front of, I could be in front of hundreds of thousands of people on a video, but in a room with 10 people, I'm supposed to talk. I get
See,
way so nervous. Yeah.
and I'm the opposite. If you put me in front of a camera, this is fine because we're talking. But if I was for a while trying to make little videos on my own, I
Yeah.
felt so awkward and dumb. But
It takes
I'll
just
go and talk in
practice.
front of thousands of people. I don't care. I love the interactive aspect of it. But when I'm just like talking to the camera, it felt very weird to me.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes practice. It feels weird for everyone at first. That's for sure.
Yeah,
My very first video is so cringe.
I feel
It's
the
actually
same
on
about
my
mine.
it's actually on my website. I'm like, hopefully people don't really watch it, but do you see the progress I've made in any case?
Well, and that's good, right? I guess the more practice. And then
Yeah.
also realizing, I don't spend a lot of time, and I need to get better about my marketing. I spend more time networking. I go to
That's
events that are
marketing.
locally, and it is, but I'm saying I don't have a huge presence on the internet because I would rather you get my name from somebody who's hired me and been like, oh wow, you should look at bringing Jody into your organization and doing stuff like this. Someday I'll get better at the marketing side.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is kind of influencer society. So instead of being a leader, it's called influence, right?
Right.
And I don't know that a lot of the influencers are really leaders. They're, letting you into their lives and whatever, like, they're not going at it from that angle, but you sure could. You sure could just give a little 30-second, 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute little, here's a situation where this could be done this way, or this is a situation where this was done just right, or, whatever.
Yeah, that's what I was doing. I called it, I forgot what, but it was like leadership lessons in 2 minutes or less.
Yeah.
And I had some catchy tagline. I thought it was catchy, but anyway, that's all they were, because I realized that it's got to be very short form. But yeah, someday.
Yeah. So how's your book coming? We talked about that this summer.
Yeah, I'm back in it. I had a couple of really big client projects that I had to kind of put it on hold, and I had to build that class that I'm teaching now at our local college here. So I'm back in it, and I'm working on. I've got, I don't know, 35 or about 35,000 words down already, and I'm in the phase now where I'm working on the first half because it's split in two. So Good Humans make great leaders. So the first half of the book is about being a good human and what that means. Um, I'm working through that piece and I want to get all that done. And then I've got things written on the second half, but I figure once I've got the first half developed, then I'll be able to, directly translate the things into the leadership side without being redundant.
Yeah.
Because I hate books that are, great articles crammed into a book, is what I say. Like it should have been an article instead of a book. So I'm trying to write in a shorter format where 1,500 to 2,000 words per chapter, whatever feels natural. I'm not, trying to make them super long, but at the end of each chapter are going to be, and it was interesting you brought up earlier, like writing down questions and answering them.
Yeah.
The end of each chapter are all these journal prompts about the topic that I was just discussing in the chapter. And in the beginning of the book, I say, I want this book to look like absolute crap when you're done with it. I want it to be dog-eared and written in and highlighted and beat up because it goes everywhere with you. That's the idea behind it. 1,500 to 2,000 words. And then I want you to spend time with these questions. What does this mean to you? How does this show up in your life? Where do you want to go with this concept or this topic? So it'll be one of those books, if you read it front to back, probably take you a few hours, but I want you to spend a lot longer with it than that. That's the goal that I'm going for. So it's going well. I'm back in it now. I found that with writing a book, I have these moments where I'm just super productive. And then, life happens, right? And I've got it written on my dry erase board here. The problem with excuses is that they're true. So all of these things pop up and I'm like, I'm just not inspired today, or whatever. But yeah, I'm chugging along and I want to finish it within the next year. That's kind of my goal. But I also said that last year and then got super busy. So, we'll see. But I am working, I am moving forward, and that's the main thing.
Well, that's good. It is a big project, and to make it a really good one, yeah, take your time. I understand. I heard a kind of a good analogy the other day. I was on a coaching call and we were talking about this project that just seemed really huge and overwhelming, which I would imagine writing a book can seem like. And the guy said, look at it like this. It's just, you have to do 100 push-ups, right? So you do one push-up at a time.
Right.
One at a time. So a little drip each day, or, each time period, whatever, like that. Just keep at it.
And I think, yeah, the way I formatted my chapters, that's what's helped. And that's kind of how it all started. Is I'd have an idea about, empathy or whatever, and I'd just sit down and write and then put it away. And now I'm kind of like putting things where they go and then seeing how they flow and where my gaps are and what's redundant.
Yeah, I like that. I think that style is good. A lot of books just cram a bunch of information in, and then you have to make your own notes and separate it out for your thinking time. But this is really nice, and it'll provide a kind of a framework for, let's read a few pages and consider this idea, and then maybe we'll implement it, we'll think about it, and then we move on after we've mastered that kind of idea, or at least spent some time on it.
Yeah, and it's full of sarcasm and squirrel moments, and I put that right up front. I want it to feel like we're just sitting down and having a beer, drinking a coffee, and having a conversation kind of like we are now about leadership or about friendship or about whatever. That's the idea. That's the intent with my book, is that it feels like that. So it's not, and I say in the beginning of the book, I don't have a PhD. I'm not some guy who, has a job that requires me to wear a awesome corduroy jacket with elbow patches or anything. I'm just some dude who spent 30 years doing this stuff, and I've seen a lot, and I love talking about it.
Yeah. Well, to teach, you only have to be one step ahead of everybody else, right?
That's right. That's right. Or able to facilitate the conversation. And that's what I just like doing that. I like, pulling the string and getting that going.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so much fun. And I think I introduced you to my friend Chris. I don't know if you guys have talked anymore or anything, but he tickles my brain in a way that nobody else has. And I think it's about facilitating the thought and the conversation on some idea, and that is a particular ability. It really is. And it's something to experience too. If you're receptive to it and you get engaged in that way, you get done with it and you're like, wow, that is so cool,
Yeah. And that's what I want people to walk away with from the book, is thinking, wow, that was, that helped.
Yeah. Yeah. Chris's question, and the thing that The time I met him and saw him speak, he talked to an inner circle group I was part of. And the question he asked us was, finish this sentence. The world will be a much better place if blank. And then he gave us
Yeah.
time to think about that. And I've asked that question to so many people since then. And some people just give a pat answer really quickly. But some people like get into head scratching and they go away and think about it for a while and they come back with some really interesting answers.
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the ones that I love to ask, especially if I'm facilitating a leadership workshop,
Mhm.
is what assumptions do you make about others that affect you as a leader? And for the older generation, the number one answer is that nobody works as hard as I do.
Yeah.
Right. Or that they don't want to work, or, you hear all kinds of stuff. But when people start to say it out loud and then it opens the discussion, you start to see how sometimes that's not really true,
Right.
or how it affects your leadership because you go in with that assumption. And I talk about that's one of my main points. If I could remove the word assume from the dictionary, I would, and I would replace it with ask. You can never go wrong asking somebody else what they're thinking or how they're feeling. Every argument ever on the face of the planet probably comes down to assumptions being made from one party to the other.
Yeah.
It's just miscommunication. But if you remove those assumptions and you ask the questions, then you've got a stronger foundation on which to start the conversation.
Yeah. That question could probably have saved countless marriages.
100%. And it's funny because I'll be, conducting a workshop and I hear people every time, it never fails. People are like, that's what happens with my husband or my wife. And I'm like, yep. Because leadership it's just another form of relationship. And everything that I talk about, it can be applied to your life, right? Because you're leading yourself again sometimes, and not saying that you're leading your family as you would a team, but realize that you're constantly modeling the behavior you want to see in others. And that's a form of leadership. And all of this stuff absolutely applies to our friendships, our marriages, our relationships, the relationships with our kids, all of it, all of it.
Yeah.
And I brought a lot of lessons learned from my daughter into work and vice versa.
Yeah. Yeah. Lead by example. Right.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So how could we bless your business? In what way could we help you and, prod you,
That's
push you along, bring you along?
That's a great question. If you, I will tell you this, I woefully underestimated the power of our military network when I first got out, because I was already doing this. I started about a year before I got out, and I do a lot of veteran network stuff just because I like being around that group of people. And I love connecting people. My brain works that way. If you say, "Oh, I need a cup of coffee," my brain immediately goes to, who do I know that makes coffee? Oh, you should meet my friend so and so. So I just love doing that. But I never in a million years thought, especially with what I do, that in our military network, they would be able to, move my business along at all. And Sherri, I was 100% wrong, because I would say 90% of my initial business came from my military network, because what I failed to realize was that, yeah, you might have been in the military for the same amount of time that I was, but your sister or your mom or your brother or your dad or your best friend, like my best friend, one of mine, is out in corporate America. And they started connecting me because I already had the reputation within my veteran network. And they're like, oh, I need to connect you with, my friend or whatever. That led to a ton of business for me. And the question that you asked, what can you do to help bless my business? It's, if you like what I say and realize, I tell everybody, I'm not everybody's cup of tea. If I have a classroom full of 30 people, there's usually one or two that are like, I don't like this dude, right? My style is not there, and that's fine. I get that. But I have a pretty high success rate. I'm usually up in the 95%, sometimes 100, where everybody's like, oh, that was amazing. Every once in a while, you get one or two that were, just not into it. But if you need individual coaching, if you need leadership development kind of stuff, or somebody who does, please just pass my name along. And at least it allows me to have the conversation with them. That's what really helps me out more than anything else, is being put in the room with somebody, or the virtual room.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to put all your information in the description, and it'll also be on an end screen for this video. We always try to get your information out so anybody who wants to connect with you or could use what you do can reach you easily. Okay, so then what would be the one single most important piece of advice that you would give someone who's transitioning out to save them from stumbling or having difficulty? How could you ease someone's transition? We talked about mourning your past self.
Yeah, mourning the loss of your former identity, if that's a thing for you. It's not for everyone, but I will say it's all rooted in that self-awareness piece. And it kind of centers around really understanding who you are and what you want. And the most important piece of advice, and it does not apply to everybody because not everybody has a significant other, but if you have another person in your life, make sure you are having those conversations with them and don't taint their perspective with yours. So one of the things we do when I teach at the Honor Foundation is we ask the fellows a bunch of questions, and then we ask them to go home if they have a significant other and give those questions to their significant other without telling them what their answers were. And then when they come back, they're always like, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
that was an amazing conversation, right? Because their definition of making good money was this, and mine was this. So, and that's objective, right? Because we're talking about numbers, and then you're able to have those types of conversation because it's scary for everybody. If you have a significant other in your life, getting out of, any job or anything is scary for everybody. So make sure you're having that conversation with them as well.
Excellent advice. But thank you so much for coming today. I had fun this summer visiting with you and again today. And I look forward to talking with you when you get done with your book and helping kind of promote that. And yeah, we'll put the title of that out on the description as well so people can start watching for it. We'll put a little pressure on you.
Yeah, thanks. I started saying it out loud about a year ago because then once I put it in the world, it's like, okay, I've got to finish this thing.
Yeah.
Before that, it was the secret. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks, Jody. Thanks for coming. It was so good to talk.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It was great to see you again.
Absolutely.